So there's a quote I always use that says, if you want your relationship to last, make sure that God is in it. Okay. And that you're putting God first at the forefront of your relationship. Because I believe that with that foundation, it will allow you to show up in the way that you need to show up. It will allow you to, one, even ensure you're with the right person to begin with. It's what you need to be able to lean on in times where there's going to be the ups and downs of any relationship, as well as implementing the principles that God has for us that will create success in our relationships. Now, of course, if we want God in it, then we have to have two people who believe and embrace God being in it, right? And so for you as a woman, many of you desire to date a man of God, but if we're being real, many of you feel like there's not much out there or not much that you want out there, right? And that you're having a hard time meeting that kind of a guy. And I get it. But I think there's a lot of things being overlooked, a lot of misunderstandings that's leading to this disconnect because there's lots of men of God and there's lots of women of God, but they're not always finding each other. Okay. And some of the things that we're going to discuss today, I believe, is going to help um, eliminate that issue or at least lessen that issue for many of you. So, to get to it, things that I think you need to be aware of if you want to date a man of God. And let me just say, I'm giving you my perspective. Pray about it. Ask God if what I'm saying is correct and something that you should be embracing. But I'm giving you what I believe to be true and what I have prayed about. All right. And I'm sharing this with you. So one of the first things to know if you want to date a man of God is that you can't lean on your own understanding. All right. So what am I talking about here? Let me start off with a little short, quick story. Many years ago, I was invited to speak at a woman's house. She was having this woman's gathering, right, event for women at her church. And so I go there, and one of the ladies pulls me to the side, and she happened to be like, let's say, the head lady of the church. Like she was the strongest member. I don't know how you would phrase it, but either way, you get what I'm saying. She pulled me to the side and she said, "Hey, I'm trying to get married. I'm still single. Can you help me?" And she was 50 years old, I believe, at the time. And I said, "So you want to be married? Has anyone ever proposed to you?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "How many times?" She said, "3 times." And I said, "So you told them all no?" She said, "Yeah, I told them all no." I said, "If I may ask, why did you tell them no?" And she said, "Well, I felt like they weren't on the spiritual level they needed to be on. I felt like they weren't where they needed to be, so I said no." And I said, "Okay, cool. Let me ask you this. In any of those situations, did you stop, pray, and ask God about those issues and about those men?" And she said, "No." And that's one example, but I have so many more of where women are leaning on their own understanding or perspective of evaluating a man's walk with God, where he's at, and if they should be entertaining him. And I think that when we're specifically talking about wanting a man of God, it's different if you're just dating whoever and this doesn't matter to you, right? And I think as long as you are a believer and you're going to want God in your relationship, well, it starts with going to God about the people that you meet and are going to potentially date. Because it's not for you to determine what someone's walk or level is. Not to mention, just a quick different story, and this is not really a dating story, but just an example of how things can change with people. I remember seeing someone, they were an influencer, to be honest with you. And I don't want to say what this person was doing because I don't want to give away, like, I don't want anyone trying to guess who this person is. But this individual used to engage in certain things on the internet that I'm not going to lie, I was not a fan of at all, okay? But I always tell myself, like, you don't know these people, pray for them. Like, I really believe in not judging. That's a whole different discussion. But bottom line is, all right, I would see this, I would see this. And then I remember one day coming across them again, and that person completely changed their life, changed what they were doing on the internet, and gave their life to God. And it was just a reminder of how, like, you never know when someone's about to turn that corner. You never know when someone's about to elevate in their life and get into something different, whatever the case may be. And that's good or bad. You never know when someone's going to take a left turn. You don't know when someone's going to take the right turn. The point is, you got to be careful with making your own assumptions and trying to evaluate people based off your own understanding of things. And so when we apply that to dating and a woman who would like to date a man of God, you may be looking at things through your lens, right? But God knows the bigger picture. God knows what's really going on here. And if this man is going to either remain where he's at, go on a completely different path, because just as I've seen women overlook a man who actually is a man of God and may be about to walk into a greater season of relationship with God, I've also seen women fall for the man who acts like he loves God or acts like he has a relationship with God. And in reality, he's the devil in disguise, ready to completely destroy your life. All right. I've seen it go both ways. So that just goes more to show you can't rely on your own eyes and ears in trying to evaluate this man's spiritual walk and if he qualifies as a man of God for you. Now, that doesn't mean in a situation where, let's just say, you meet a guy and he's not there yet with his relationship with God, right? As far as even embracing it. That I'm not saying to you, oh, well, go be with this man and eventually he may get, no. I'm sure if you prayed about it, God will tell you to wait until it actually happens. But it also means don't just completely write him off unless you've gotten that confirmation or you talk to God about it, right? The other thing I want to mention before I move on to the next point, because I see this happen a lot, is women have to understand, a lot of women need to understand how men and women worship God can sometimes look very different, right? And one of the examples I love to use is there was a book I was reading called Why Men Hate Going to Church. And one of the points that it was making was, it makes a big point of how church has gone away from the masculine energy and more to the feminine energy. And that plays into why a lot of men don't feel comfortable or even welcome going to a church, right? But he made an example of how women tend to be more into praise and worship, whereas men tend to be more into just receiving the word, getting that message they need. And how a lot of men don't feel comfortable going to the praise and worship service, whereas a woman could just, that whole service could be praise and worship and she's good, okay? And I'm gonna be real with y'all. I remember when I read that, I was like, that's me, because literally I will wait outside during praise and worship before I walk in to hear the word, because I'm like, yo, that doesn't connect with me in that way. Does that mean I don't love God? No, it's just, I have friends who are very outwardly in their expression of praising and worshiping God, right? They get loud, they start doing all kinds of wild stuff. And I'm in general a more chill person. And it's not just when it comes to spirituality and God. Shoot, even if you catch me out somewhere, I'm usually just chilling in the back to myself. I'm just not all out there like that in general. If it wasn't for the career I have, you would never see me on the internet. You wouldn't see me on videos. I don't like, that's not my thing. Anyways, all that to say, some people are just wired differently, but it doesn't define their love of God, their relationship with God, their walk with God, or any of that. So all that to say, again, do not lean on your own understanding. Make sure you consult with God about that man and where he's at, and if he is someone that you can accept into your life. All right, so another thing I think you need to know if you want to date a man of God is that you still have to show him who you are outside of spirituality. Here's what I mean. So again, another example. I had a client one time where she was overseas. She used to go to this church, and she had this huge crush on, I believe he was a junior pastor. He was preparing to become one of the lead pastors eventually, but at that time, junior pastor, whatever you call it. And she felt like he might like her, but she wasn't sure. And whenever they would have interactions, it would always be talking about God, the Bible, all spirituality. That's it, right? And so things seem to not be progressing in any kind of way. It wasn't really evolving into anything. And then one day when I was talking to her and coaching her, and I found out that all of her interactions were just God and scripture, I said, well, maybe he's not pursuing because he doesn't really know who you are outside of that. Like, there is more to you than that. That's your foundation. That's your rock. But there is more to you and your personality than quoting scripture, right? I said, listen, I want you to try next time you interact with him, just be yourself. Now, let me say this. Part of what contributed to that was I feel that, and she acknowledged this, she felt like she needed to show up so much as this woman of God because this man's in line to be, the head pastor or whatever, that again, she was forgetting that he's still a human being, still a man. There's still a life outside when you're not at church and when you're not reading the Bible or something. So anyways, once I brought that to her attention, I was like, yo, just be yourself. Talk about some other things too. Like, show your personality in other ways. And then she listened, she did it, and it changed everything. And now he seemed to be more drawn to her. He wanted to talk more. He was down to go on a date. Like, it really moved things in the direction she wanted. So I believe it's very important to understand that you still have to show who you are, okay? And again, nothing wrong, of course, with God and spirituality being your foundation and the thing that you lean on, but there's going to be more to you than that. And you want to make sure that when you're talking to guys, you are expressing your true personality, you're being yourself, you're exuding that other positive, good, feminine energy, all these different things, because that's going to play in his willingness of seeing you as a potential partner. Because listen, you could be, if all you're focused on is the spiritual side, then you may present yourself as a good friend to have. You may present yourself as someone to be connected to, right? And someone to be a good sister in Christ or something, right? But that doesn't show you as that's a person I want to share my life with romantically. That there's another level to this, that requires you to come out with more. So be mindful of that, not falling into that pitfall, so to speak, right? I think it's a very important thing to be aware of. All right, so here's another thing I think you need to be aware of if you want to date a man of God. And that is that attraction still matters. So why do I say that? What I have seen, right? And it doesn't mean it doesn't apply to everybody, of course. But what I have seen a lot is women of God who devalue or diminish the importance of attraction or looks to a certain extent, because their mindset is, well, if it's a godly thing, it's supposed to be genuine. It's about what's on the inside, so on and so forth. And of course, what's on the inside matters the most, all right? Your relationship with God matters as well. But we cannot act like what's on the outside does not matter at all. And I think that some people assume, well, if he's a man of God, it should not matter. But no, it still matters because he's still a man, right? Now, granted, it will matter less for some than others. Everyone has their levels of how important attraction is, right? As well as what is going to be attractive to them. Because I think there's other mistake that a lot of women make is that you may look at 10 of your friends, right, and say, oh my gosh, I have all these beautiful friends and they're all single and none of these men of God or men at the church are trying to date them, right? And it's like, yeah, they may indeed be beautiful women. That doesn't mean they're beautiful to him or that specific guy, or not even beautiful, that he's attracted to them. Because I do believe people can find someone, can say that person is good looking, that person is beautiful, whatever, but they don't do it for me. They're not their style, whatever the case may be. That can happen as well. And so simply thinking that your perception of them or whatever should be enough, no, that's not the way it works. But getting back to this whole dynamic of the man of God shouldn't worry about looks and attraction. I think a lot of people, you see, I was like, lost my words. A lot of people, in my professional opinion, aren't as forthcoming about how important attraction really is to them, especially people of God, right? Because there is this level of, oh, well, we shouldn't be shallow or whatever the case may be. And then you'll have some people who claim, well, looks don't matter. And let me make something clear. Despite what people say, looks matters to everyone. Some of you may be disagreeing right now, but let me break it down for you real quick. It matters to everyone because everyone has a line of what is acceptable to them, all right? If looks didn't matter at all, that means that someone can bring you a guy who looks like whatever, who could be 7 inches shorter than you, who could, have some very undesirable traits, undesirable to you. And you would be like, you know what? As long as they're a good guy. And that's just not the case. It's like, yes, some people, when they say looks don't matter, it means they may be more flexible. They may be more broad in what they will entertain and engage in, but they still have a line. Everyone still has a line. And so it's not fair to then say, well, your line shouldn't be over here and your line should be over there. No, everyone has their line. Everyone has their preferences. As long as no one's out there disrespecting people and acting nasty and wrong to each other, people like what they like, and that's fine, because attraction, whether people want to accept it or not, has a huge role in the longevity and success of relationships, right? And the way that people show up for each other in relationships. I'll say that whole breakdown for a different video, but it's just a fact that attraction is a big thing, even though some people aren't being honest about that. So, with that said, yes, you still, I'm not telling you this to have you trying to look a certain kind of way. Like, you got to be you. You got to tap into whatever your potential is, right? And you got to be happy in your body and what you see and how you're presenting yourself. But I do not want you to keep falling for this idea that it won't matter if he's a man of God. That's typically not true. That's it. I don't want to ever say never, but typically that's not going to be true. So attraction still matters. And let me just point this out. I keep using the word attraction because I do believe that when I say looks, it's kind of different when I say attraction. Looks is like people wanting a very specific profile of what they're going to entertain. They got to be this tall, this weight, this height, whatever, this hair color, whatever the case may be. Attraction is more flexible in the sense of it's simply about I have to find them appealing, I have to be drawn to them, things of that nature. And I believe that everyone, that attraction, not looks, is the thing that's super, super important. Because no matter what your style and type is, plenty of people have met someone that fell outside of that box and they were still attracted to them, all right? So attraction will still matter even with the man of God. All right, so before we continue, I want you to get your copy of my book, 40 Prayers for My Future Husband. It's a book that you are going to love, and it's going to help you in you preparing to receive that man that is truly for you, all right? Click the link in the description or in the comment section, or go to prayersformyfuturehusband.com. Again, you're going to love that book. But let's continue. So another thing you need to be mindful of if you want to date a man of God, and this one, some of you might be a little sensitive to, so bear with me, take a deep breath, and just hear me out, okay? You have to be prepared for this man's leadership. Here's what I'm saying. Now, I know many of you may have the mentality of, why does anyone need to lead? It's us, doing it together. It's a partnership, all these different things. And if that's your thing, that's your thing. So be it. However, I will make the argument that one, I think for most relationships, never say all, but for most relationships, the man being the lead, and of course leading with love, leading with respect, leading through God leading him, right, is going to be the best dynamic in the long run for everybody. But also, if he is a man of God, then he's being groomed, or let me not use the word groom, he's being nurtured to be someone that can lead in his relationship, because that's what God wants with the men, right? And so I bring this up and I put this on the list because I remember one time I had a friend who, at the time, she was single. Things weren't, going her way. And I remember I believe it was a dream. And I woke up, and I'm not going to get into the whole dream, but I prayed about it, and God was like, call her and tell her what he kind of put in my heart in that moment. And so I had said to her, I said, listen, your man, you can receive that man, but God needs you to be prepared to take the passenger seat, because she's very used to doing her own thing, leading her own way, go getter, type of thing. But I'll get to that in a second, what I'm about to say. Either way, very strong personality is what I'm getting at, all right? And I said, you're going to have to be prepared to jump in the passenger seat. And I asked her, are you prepared to do that, right? She said, honestly, I don't know right now. I don't have an answer for you. Let me sit with this, okay? Spoke to her 2 weeks later. She said, honestly, I thought about it, and no, I'm not prepared to do that. Now, why? For her, one of those reasons was because she grew up not seeing her father be a leader, or more specifically, be a man that she could rely on, that she can lean on. And so for her, it was like, if I can't even trust my own father to lead properly, why am I going to be out here trusting any man? All right? And that was something that she had to conquer before she could receive that man of God that she wanted. All right? Because in most cases, when a woman is saying she wants that man of God, whether she verbalizes or not, part of that comes with her wanting a man she can lean on, wanting a man who is capable of leading. But it's like, what's the purpose of a man capable of leading if you can't accept the lead? Now, this is not me saying let any random guy you date lead you. What I'm saying is you have to be prepared for that, right? So in that example, she was not prepared because she had not healed from certain things that was blocking her ability to receive that. And whether you realize it or not, that will contribute to the type of men that you attract and even entertain while in the dating process, all right? For someone else, it may just be becoming comfortable with the whole concept of it, right? There's various things that could be at play as to how a woman needs to prepare for that, but it's just preparing. It's not about it needs to be implemented even at the dating level. You see what I'm saying? Because if we just gonna keep it real, he doesn't acknowledge dating, so to speak. It's like God knows friends or married. Like, we created this whole dating dynamic. I think God can still help us because he understands what we're doing down here. That doesn't mean that's what he created for us to do, right? But if we ask him, hey, should we be talking to this person? He can still give us guidance on that. But yes, I just wanted to make sure you understand it's about preparing and truly being in a position where you are ready to accept such things when it's time for it to come into your life. All right, so we got a few more to go. So another thing I want you to be mindful of or be aware of if you want to date a man of God is that feminine energy still matters. So if you notice, a lot of me compiling this list of things for you to be aware of, I'm pulling from a lot of experiences I've had with clients and even friends and so on and so forth about their journey to receiving that man of God. And one of the things that I have seen a lot of in women of God is when a woman has been single for a long time and she has a relationship with God, many become accustomed to essentially leading themselves. Many have become accustomed to handling things on their own, right? And so when you become very very, what's the word, even consumed by independence. And I understand you got to do what you got to do, right? I'm not knocking you, so to speak, for engaging in that, because you got to handle your business. But for many women, that can cause them to now fall into a more masculine energy at a higher level than they may realize, to where now that's what they're that's their default energy. That's what they exude most of the time. That's what they're comfortable in most of the time. And now turning that off and switching back to their feminine can be very difficult, right? Now, with that, again, I think a lot of people, when they are people of God, I feel like sometimes, I don't want to say make excuses for, but diminish the importance of things, because it's like, well, I'm a good person at my heart. I love God. So the person for me should be able to see through all of any issue that I may have. And it's like, everyone's still human. And yeah, they might be able to see past the issue in the sense of believing you are a good woman, believing that there is a potential here, but their ability to embrace being with you, going through that process of dating with you, is going to be affected by what you are presenting and the energy that you're exuding, right? Amongst other factors. So there's still a responsibility on your end to make sure you are showing up in the way that is most effective for you. And feminine energy is still going to be an important thing. And I would say, especially with a man of God, because again, it kind of connects to the whole being prepared for his leadership, in the sense that, in my opinion, men of God are supposed to be men of excellence, right? Now, that doesn't mean perfect, and we'll get into that a little bit later in the video, but striving to reach their potential, and everyone's potential is different, right? But at the very least, not wasting the gifts and the capabilities that God gave them, and walking in their purpose and things of that nature. That's supposed to happen with a man of God. And so with that brings him more into his masculine energy, right? So he's going to desire a woman who brings balance, that feminine energy, into his life when we're talking about sharing life together. In most cases, of course, there's exceptions to every rule. There's going to be some men out there who are men of God who will say, no, I want me a super strong woman, and I like a woman in her masculine. So be it. But I would argue that is not the majority. With that said, it can become very easy to overlook this important fact. And as a woman, I think the best thing is, it always starts with healing. Like almost anything that we talk about can go back to healing. If you're struggling to tap into your feminine energy, healing is where you start, because that will help unlock a lot of things. A lot of women are exuding masculine energy out of what they view as a need for protection. And that masculine energy is a defense mechanism, right? Because that feminine energy is a more vulnerable energy, so to speak. And so I always say the same walls you have to protect you, the same walls blocking your blessings. So a lot of people got walls up, and it is getting in the way of them establishing healthy, good relationships, or being able to come together with a good man of God. So all that to say, don't think feminine energy is still not going to be important. One of the themes you can take from this video is he's a man of God, but he's still a man. And that doesn't mean in the way of him being bad or something. That in the way of there's still desires that most men have that he will still possess, right? And so we can't just think, it won't matter anymore because he has a relationship with God. No, it goes with his relationship with God. It all connects to it, okay? And so embrace that and be willing to look more into that if this is an area that you struggle with. All right. So another, and to me this is very important, thing that you should be aware of. I mean, they're all important, but the thing you should be aware of if you want to date a man of God, and that is he will not be perfect. Now, I know some of you are saying, of course he's not perfect. Okay, yeah, but the problem is I have seen so many scenarios where a man's imperfections is used to disqualify him as being a man of God, or to undermine his walk with God, to undermine him as even a good man, right? And it's like, yo, how is it that we keep saying we know no one's perfect, but then we literally hold people to these standards of perfection that the moment they fall short from it, throw the whole person away. And it's like, no, you got, this kind of goes back to what I said in the beginning of the video about not leaning on your own understanding, because you got to be able to see past just that moment. And you got to understand, okay, is what I'm seeing or what I'm experiencing with this man a symptom of a character flaw, a symptom of someone who's I'm not in alignment with, or is this a good person who loves God, but this is a struggle of his, or this is a mistake he's making at the moment, or the case may be. And it doesn't mean, again, take it upon yourself to, just as I don't want you to just use it immediately to discount, dismiss, and devalue, I also don't want you to just automatically look past it and say, okay, no big deal, we'll just keep it moving forward. No. Of course, this is where we have to keep God in it. This is how we have to make sure, all right, let me gain clarity on what's really going on here. But do not throw, it doesn't always mean this person is not serious about God, okay? And so I'll give this analogy because people always love to use you test people by their fruits. And there's a lot I have to say about that, right? I have a lot of beliefs about that whole scripture and how people are implementing and using it. But let's go with the analogy of that. Let me ask you this. If you had a tree and the tree bore good fruit 364 days out the year, delicious, juicy fruit, all right, good fruit, right, can feed nations. But one day out the year, for whatever reason, this tree produces some spoiled, nasty fruit that you cannot eat, right? Does that mean, if you owned this tree, would you say, oh, one day out the year, not good enough. Cut the whole tree down, throw it away, done. Or would you say, no, this is a really good tree. It clearly has one day that it struggles, but this is a really good tree. I'm going to continue with this tree. Now, anyone who's dealt with like farming or whatever would know, like even the best trees might have some seasons of bad fruit, but it's still a good tree. And so that's the way I look at people. Like, listen, I think sometimes we're saying judge them by their fruit, but it's like, oh, so you only want to use the bad fruit to judge them, but you don't use the good fruit. you ignore all the good that they did, but that one mistake, now it's, oh, that's who they really are. No, stop. In some cases, that may be the case, but again, don't decide that for yourself. Let God tell you. Talk to God about it. But just understand that he is a human being. And a man, everyone makes mistakes. Everyone has their moments. It doesn't define who they are, okay? There's so much more to an individual than that. So just understand that, yes, he's not going to be perfect. He could love you to the end of this earth. It doesn't mean he will never do something stupid. That's just the reality of life. That's just the reality of being a human being. So always make sure you are going to God. All right. And now last but not least, I already said it a bunch of times. I'm just going to reiterate it one more time. If you want to date a man of God, you got to make sure you talk to God. That's it. But I put this on the list because I also want to give you one more story. And I'm going to make it quick. There was a woman once I met. I don't want to say where I met her. I don't want to give any details. I'll just say, met a woman once. She talked about how she was frustrated because she was still single. 10 years before that day that we spoke, when she was going through a moment, she had came to the conclusion that she would give her life to God, and that by doing that, God would bless her with a man. And so she dedicated her life to church for the next 10 years. She was in that church 5-6 days a week, right? Doing everything she can for the Lord. And after 10 years, she's still single. So she was mad. She was resentful. She was angry with God, right? But after kind of getting her to get to a calm place, how she was feeling in that moment, I had to bring to her attention, like, okay, you went to that church because you felt that was the thing to do. But did you stop and ask God if that's what you should do? And she said, no. And that's the thing that we do too much in life, is that we make our assumptions. We jump to certain conclusions. Well, if I do this, if I do that, God will bless this. And it's like, yo, God will bless the things that he wants you to do. But if you go out and do your own thing, even if it looks good or godly on the surface, he didn't ask for that. He didn't tell you to go do that. And that's why you have to be careful with jumping to your own conclusions on what needs to happen next. All right? Because what if for her calling was not to go and work in the church? Maybe her calling was to go work in a school. Maybe her calling was to go work in a hospital. Like, who knows where she actually was supposed to be? And in that place, she would have maybe met that man. Because it's also not about go here and automatically everything works. There's a timing to it. And God's timing and our timing ain't the same, okay? Sometimes it might happen quick for some people. For others, it might be a long time. None of us gets to pick and choose that. That's completely on God. All we can do is make sure we are seeking his guidance, being obedient, and doing our part. And again, no one's perfect. Just as I said, the men ain't perfect, you're not perfect. So it doesn't mean any mistake you made, now everything is destroyed and you're not going to receive a blessing. Relax. Just keep talking to God. To me, as long as you keep talking to God, you keep seeking God's guidance, things will fall into place. If you keep moving in the direction he wants, even if you detour for a second, all right, talk to him and let's get back on the path. And let's just keep going and keep making progress and trust that he can guide you to what is best for you. All right? So lean on God, put your faith in God, but understand that the process has a purpose. So even though we get frustrated with it, we don't like it, it's going beyond the time that we wanted, there is a purpose for it. Just focus on, all right, what do you want me to do? What does God want you to do? And keep moving forward. Thank you for watching this video. I pray it was helpful to you. Be sure to watch this one over here on why God still hasn't removed your feelings for that man. It's consuming you now. And in consuming you and it constantly being on your mind, well, then it magnifies it more. But it's not magnifying necessarily